Superheroes are obviously a trope that has been done, innovated, and replicated many times over, though there's nothing that quite tells the story and what it would really mean, quite like the show. Did I do it? Am I a real YouTuber now? Hi, my name is Oridont. Thank you so much for letting me borrow your screen. This world kind of sucks. Let's build a new one. The story of Invincible holds a similar historical structure as basic superhero stories, especially similar to that of Superman. Our protagonist, Mark Grayson, learns from a young age that he is an alien from the planet Viltrum. Viltrumites are inhumanely capable creatures, flaunting insane super strength, flight, moving faster than the speed of light, and much more, all once reaching full maturity and strength. What he does not discover is that his father, Omni-Man, is actually intending to conquer Earth for the Viltrumite species, as is done with a great multitude of other populations. Once Mark finally gains access to his powers, he learns that the truth behind superheroism is that it's actually terrible. An on-Earth purgatory, maybe even worse. What do our problems mean to us, and what do they mean to the world? While a young Mark is growing up, going to school, dealing with life, he's regularly bullied and weighed down by the monotony. Mark slowly waits for the moment he knows will come soon, the day he finally gets his powers. Now, I want to say that I do believe that the writers did a really good job of expressing his age in this story. Realistically, he is a teenager, and if you were to come across these problems in adulthood, this would be a completely different story altogether. But he's not. He's a kid. All of this sounds so fun and so crazy and so happy. But to an adult, it just sounds hard and difficult and would completely change the entire scope. Once Mark has finally claimed his powers, revealed to him in the way of him accidentally throwing a bag of garbage into space, he takes to the skies with his father for training. A series of events, including being recruited as a superhero, training with his Viltrumite dad, and still dealing with his everyday life, he begins to realize how these worlds truly collide. He's quick to discover that his teenage life, problems, and growth as a person gets quickly overshadowed by his duties as one of the most powerful beings on Earth. One thing that I think is very important to explain here that really sets Mark apart physically from a lot of other characters in this show is that he seems to have a Viltrumite durability without the offensive capabilities. So he can take an absolute beating, but he's not always able to dish it back, meaning that he can get himself in very, very precarious scenarios without really being able to defend himself in any way other than just serving as a giant meat wall that just won't die for some reason. In a blossoming relationship with his young love interest, Amber, it's found that there's really no such thing as a true vacation. He's always on call, devastation doesn't wait for him to enjoy his time. In attempting to persist with his own personal Earthling identity, walking around in normal clothes as Mark Grayson, he's forced into a secret identity, that of which he hides from Amber. There's a lot of controversy around how Amber handles this information, but I'm not going to get too deep into that in this video. I will say, my opinion is not the same as the norm, so subscribe if you want to hear more about that. Everything begins to crumble when trouble knocks on his front door amidst a date with Amber. In order for him to be able to fully face the issue at hand and protect the people around him, Mark Grayson needs to disappear so Invincible can arrive. Though people may be thankful of the actions of Invincible, those who aren't aware of the duality of his identity, that being most people, find Mark's vacancy completely inexcusable. This is another huge thing about Mark Grayson and his secret identity, is that every single time that he has to do something to save somebody, Mark just looks worse. Mark Grayson, the student, looks worse every time Invincible looks good. And a lot of times, same vice versa. I mean, even all of the heroes that do know both identities of his, they know that if Mark Grayson is out having fun when somebody's in trouble, well, that just looks bad on both of them. So you really can't make everyone happy. In fact, you can't even make more than 50% of people happy at this point. It's a really, really hard spot to be in and just puts that much more weight on the responsibility of keeping your identity private. As time goes on, these types of issues only begin to compound. As the scale of devastation increases, his personal life becomes more and more dwarfed regardless of what Mark wants or needs as a person. Finally, Mark finds out about his father's intentions of conquering Earth. This shows him the true concerns that he's facing. The world is at stake. Everything he's ever wanted, loved, and every waking life around him. Adding insult to injury, his father informs him that his lifespan will far exceed that of any human being around him, meaning that he will outlive every single person he's met so far. He explains that humanity in this world will crumble around him, and he will be left youthful as he watches the people around him age and die. Mark, regardless, remains steadfast in his human opinions, deciding that he'd rather remain a part of Earth's population over the Viltrumites. This opinion is retorted with a near-death beating from his father, followed by Omni-Man leaving Earth in realization and consideration. This is where Season 1 of Invincible leaves off, and really sets a terrible scene for Mark. No matter what Mark wants, what he wishes, or how he wants his life to be, he will forever remain one of the only people capable of saving the world. He can live his life as a teenager, pursue his love interests and his human desires, but he will forever be the only person that could have saved the world in a scenario when it fails. There's only one other superhero in mainstream media that I've seen that really kind of begins to show this idea of just how awful it is to be a superhero, and that is Spider-Man. And a lot of the movies don't really show it that well. The comics do a great job. There's a scene from Spider-Man where he's literally sitting on top of the Empire State Building and he's just holding his mask and saying, "Hey, God, why is it so shitty?" Like literally trying to speak to God, and then he just laughs it off and goes about his day. It really shows that a teenager being shunted into this life really doesn't get a chance to grow up. They're born into it, they don't get a chance to develop properly, that this is just how they are. They're conditioned into this world where they get nothing out of it. They are a purely altruistic superhuman who doesn't get any time or rights. It's a painful and paradoxical. If he really loves those around him, he needs to leave them for his greater duties. Season 2 does a great job of not only solidifying these previous sentiments, that he is subjectively responsible for the greater aspirations of humanity, but even more than that, it paints a new picture for us. Superhero stories gloss over how these superhumans would actually function in reality. Before we get too far into all of the nitty-gritty with the rest of it and kind of diving into Season 2, I'm gonna stop right here to tell you to subscribe. I don't know if you remembered to do that, but it's gonna be very important that you do that from this point on. I will sue you. There are two versions of this is how a superhuman would actually function shown in the show, social and physical. This show is obviously built for a mature audience. The bloodshed, the organs being on the outside of people, the visceral devastation, and huge mortality rate is something that is often hidden from the silver screen. In many movies, there is a zero casualty expectation when a villainous force is presented. This is obtusely unrealistic in most scenarios, and Invincible does a great job of expressing why. In simplest terms, if a building falls down, people are going to die. Even when Invincible, this absolute powerhouse of a supernatural creature, tries to prevent a building from falling, people fall out of the windows, debris and shrapnel destroy the streets. No amount of power will offer him the control he needs to save these massive numbers of lives from mortality. This is the physical aspect of things. No matter how powerful you are, you can't save everybody with pure brute force. You can't be everywhere at once. Saving these copious amounts of lives in danger requires wit, experience, circumstance, planning, and teamwork. And even then, sometimes it's just not possible. On a social aspect, the idea that a hero's secret identity is required to keep their loved ones safe is normal. What they don't express is how quick this can sneak up on you, how hard it actually is to avoid surveillance, and how futile it can be to try. Mark did everything he could in his power to avoid people from knowing who he is, yet his assailants can still fly down from light years away and put an iron grip on Amber's neck, threatening her life unless he adheres to their demands. Amber puts this in simple terms. His human relations cannot protect themselves from the threats that Mark has to put up with. They lose agency. If Amber becomes a chess piece used to control Invincible, she will have no options, no way to protect herself, nothing she can do about the situation. There's no badass sidekick relationship style available here. There's a nigh zero complexity to the situation. If somebody on Invincible's level wants her to die, she will die. It's that simple. Mark falling in love with her and spending his time with her will magnetize these issues to her, leaving Amber completely defenseless and lacking free will. Mark doesn't get happy mediums, doesn't get sweet spots, he must contend with both the issues of Mark Grayson and the issues of Invincible simultaneously if he wants to hold both of these identities. This is the superhero purgatory he's experiencing. In all blatant truth, being a superhero with real ethics and real morals is awful. It's a painful and sad existence to live. The superhero paradox. You will live longer, be healthier, have more influence on the world around you, but only if you sacrifice your ability to enjoy the simple nuances of life that made you want those things in the first place. The story of Invincible follows Mark Grayson through a maturity that nobody has ever experienced, being shunted into a life of heroism that he believed he would enjoy. Throughout Season 1 and Season 2, we watch him slowly devolve into realization that he loses his sense of choice on how he will navigate his life and is burdened with responsibility like no other. He is the only person who can save the world, and he must sacrifice himself in order to do so. If he chooses not to, he'll walk away knowing that he was the only one who could have prevented it all. Through it all, he builds a repertoire of human teenager issues and crawls through the complexities of growing up, only to realize that those issues are dwarfed by the needs of the quote-unquote greater good. What do our problems mean to us, and what do they mean to the world? Thank you so much for joining me on this recap of Invincible, specifically Season 1 and Season 2, and kind of the biggest part that I took away from it realistically. I mean, obviously there's a lot of plot threads in this show that are really, really good, but this was the big one that I kind of walked away with, really. Now, if you want to check out more stuff like this, make sure to click on one of these to go ahead and check out another video just like this one, other video essays that I do, or click on the other one. I'm pointing in the wrong direction, just keep that in mind, to check out a playlist of all of the video essays I've done. I really appreciate it. Remember, this video is just for you, which means you have to click on it. Thanks!